Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about film, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Colin McCormick.
I'm Elijah Fleming.
And I'm Christie Vogler.
And today we're preparing a little bit of a teaser as we transition sort of from one phase of the show, our last season, which was Rome on the small screen. We talked about Rome and television. And as we move into our new era, which we're tentatively calling It Belongs in a Museum, archaeology on film. So we're going to be talking about famous archaeologists in mostly popular movies, because we can't do any more TV, but Indiana Jones, Laura Croft, Jack Colton, maybe Nathan Drake. I'll make a pitch possibly for that, but we'll get into it. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about predictions, hopes, dreams, aspirations for the next upcoming season, as well as reflect back on the last season. We just talked about all of the television we watched, and we've got also a couple of games that we've planned to sort of spice it up, change up the flavor. But before we get into that, I'll just open it up, right? So as we now move out of our television era.
Oh God, yeah. This was a hard season.
This was tough. This was emotionally and physically draining, where there would be days where I looked at the calendar and I saw that I needed to have watched 10 episodes
in a single day. I did that too.
I did that with No.
Probably a few, I imagine.
No. All of them, I saw all of them except for... My God, Those About to Die. That was the one I cheated because I was traveling and I got back and I could have watched it that weekend, but I was like, I literally would rather do anything else right now. And then I ended up binging. I watched the first couple and then I ended up fast forwarding through a bunch of the middle ones. It was a bit much.
Yeah.
It says something about that show that you could do that and still have a productive conversation about it.
Well, yeah. And also, I think part of it might be academy training of I searched to the parts where I knew were going to be important, and I read a couple of plot descriptions, and so I knew what was coming.
Yeah,
I also think that it says something about the story that.
Oh no, yeah, you're
not interested, right? That you're not gripped. That it wasn't something that you were dying to finish.
There were weeks that Colin was missing.
And that's the other thing. I didn't. As I looked back over the lineup, I'm like, there's so much Spartacus I didn't watch. And I think I would have gone.
That's probably fine.
That's probably okay.
That's probably fine.
I feel like I came around on it. It's the
same
as the Ragnar
syndrome.
I ran. Yes. I was in so much pain. I got rained out again, and I'm going to do it again next year.
Yeah. It is some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome, because I do remember by the third season being have I gone all the way around?
Yeah.
From I hate this to this is actually fun. And in retrospect, I'm like, what? What did I watch? Where was I?
There's always House of Usher to remind you.
I am so mad. I can't tell you how pissed I am that we have to watch that.
I just had a passing thought about that. Is the whole reason that miniseries may exist in the future is because House of Asher sounds like House of Usher, and it's and somebody made a connection, was all right, green light, let's go.
Yeah, every episode we have hated on the premise, and then Lucy Lawless announced that she is going back. She is going to play Lucretia, right?
So,
Lucretia, yeah.
Yes. And I'm like,
she also very dead.
Very dead in a very satisfying way.
As the wise swamp bender from Avatar: The Last Airbender told us, time is an illusion and so is death.
I mean, fair enough.
And this is said to us by a man in a loincloth who magically bends plants by manipulating the water within them. So I'm ready to take him at his word.
No, I trust him inherently, just from, I of all of the spinoffs that could ever spin, this is what we get. All right.
Well, this is the natural way. Is reflecting back. We've already, Spartacus really jumped out right there. But what was your highs and lows from talking about Rome and television and missed opportunities?
Yeah. Oh, I think we had, Britannia, whatever, was a missed opportunity. We replaced it with Romulus, and in my heart of hearts, I think that was a good decision. because
Mhm.
Romulus was fun.
I was very pleasantly surprised by Romulus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we could have maybe swapped out one of the seasons of Spartacus for Barbarian.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the other one. Yep.
Or Barbarians. Barbarians,
I
the
think it's
horror movie.
Barbarians. Yeah.
And who knows, maybe in future years we will forget what a slog this last season was and we're like, let's do it again.
Truly. Well, and Eli and I mean, like when we did the like golden era 50s, 60s sword and sandals, like that
Mhm.
became kind of a slog.
Yeah.
Oh, such a
I'm
slog.
kind of glad I wasn't
100%.
there for
Yeah.
that one person. I have seen some of them, but like,
That's fine. That's
yeah.
But
fine.
now, in retrospect, like a 4-hour film with an intermission, I think like is much better in theory than a
10.
10 episode
Yeah.
miniseries.
Yeah, to be fair, especially like if you're not super interested in it or if it's not really grabbing you, it's like, yeah, if it's just 4 hours, then it's over
Yeah.
at some
Well,
point. But
this was also the kind of like I had to like check myself when I was like thinking of my reviews because I was like, do I not like this show because I think it's bad, or do I not like this show because I'm just kind of tired by
Yeah.
this?
yeah,
Although to the credit, I think Romulus was different enough that it like got me. By the end, I was invested in a way that I wasn't. Those About to Die, I was like, that was my like senioritis.
same.
I'm gonna phone it in on this
You're gonna
paper.
Anthony Hopkins this basically.
Yeah, I'm gonna look through and slowly say my lines and putter through the
Yeah,
motions and
exactly.
come out the other end.
Take me to the center of the room.
You know, it's so funny though, like, because, I kind of accidentally became a Roman archaeologist because that's just, I always loved Greek stuff. And I will say that, like, covering all of these shows this season, I've learned a lot, like, not just from watching the shows, but doing the research to understand. Like, I know I've been shown a chart of the Julio Claudian dynasty, like, so much,
Sure.
and then understanding, like, who are the Flavians that come after, and like, what were the dynamic. I have such a clearer understanding of that transition because of all of these shows.
Sure.
And like it is kind of fun to have personalities associated with these historical figures, whether or not they're, accurate. It does help. It resonates a lot more instead of, just reading it in a very dense textbook.
Sure.
So, like, I even made kind of a tentative timeline of, like, what gets covered, and I think Romulus is the earliest, obviously, then it goes to Spartacus, and then Rome with Domina kind of interspersed between Rome and I Claudius. Then we get
Yeah, there's been an overlap.
Yep, and then we get Those About to Die with the Flavians,
Mhm.
and then Thermae Romae Novae with, I believe it's Hadrian, right? So, like,
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we go from like the 8th century ish to the second,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
get barely any republic, like barely any Roman republic, and my I guess weird. I know you wanted predictions for like what we're going to talk about next season, but my weird kind of prediction or something that I want is like I want kind of a domina, but I want it for the Gracchi brothers and like their mother.
I was just
Mhm.
gonna say I wanted the Gracchi brothers
Yeah,
because I feel like that political intrigue is the kind that I would love to watch.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
I
there's a
think,
huge gap.
Yeah.
it's such a like. I mean, I think it's timely in a way because
Oh
listeners,
yeah.
for the Gracchi brothers are these kind of popularist
Hmm.
politicians who are really the first to kind of really like energize the masses and the plebeians and were able to sort of push through reform legislation, but there are these divisive figures, or are they kind of just in it for, is it political power and posturing? Are they, like, are they populists? Are
Hmm.
they actually reformists and progressives in their era? It touches into this underlying, this whole thing is a long standing class struggle that sort of basically underpins all of Roman history.
Yeah,
I joke sometimes that if you study Roman history, you come out the other end either a fascist or a Marxist,
yeah, pretty
where you come out
much.
and you're either like, emperors are a good idea and we should go to that, or you're like, the rich need to be eaten.
Yeah, no, that is so accurate,
Yeah, pretty much.
actually.
I like that I taught Roman Civ and it's like we come to the end, it's like, you know what? Rome was always a shit show. I don't know why we ever thought otherwise.
Truly.
Truly,
So,
yeah. That's what I think I did enjoy about all of our media is that it none of it like tried to gild anything. It was all very like everything is dirty and gross and gritty. And even things that were kind of funny or exaggerated was like, it's not fun. Like everyone is dying,
Yeah.
or, everyone is starving, or everyone is out to get everyone. Everyone is corrupted. And even if you have that exaggeration, I think just I don't know, putting the thought out there that our like historical figures were human and made a lot of mistakes and did a lot of bullshit in their lives, that like, I don't know, I love that.
Well, with Domina and I want to talk a little bit about this with Rome. Like one of the things I kind of like about those shows is that, there's a tendency to kind of retroject on history and look at a political figure like Augustus and think that he was this 4D chess mastermind,
Right.
Ubermensch who like saw into the future and pretty, like if there was an anime version, which maybe there should be, that would be cool. He would like have a scene where he like, I was going to say he like adjusts his glasses and they reflect, but
Oh,
that
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
work.
yeah,
He
I know
does
what you're
something. He like
saying.
grabs his token and he's like, I have predicted your move like 30 like fans in advance. Like I am operating at a higher level than all of you. I'm 20 steps ahead of you, and that he was this he was this flawless political mastermind, but really there's a good element of just like dumb luck
Yes.
and serendipity and just kind of being in the right time at the right place and all the various circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was in terms of like highs and lows, where are we falling? If you're going to recommend, like if you're going to watch one show about Rome,
Oh,
Rome.
what should people watch?
Rome, but I do love Domina too. I know it gets probably like Domina season 1 was really fun. Domina 2 went off the rails,
I didn't
admittedly.
like season 2.
But like
yeah.
I'm hoping for like a rally for season 3 if it happens.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
But no, I think Rome has really stood out, even in the midst of all of these other things, as such an engaging narrative that really plays really well into using the historical material to just tell a good story. Like it's trying to be accurate. It's like using all of these artifacts and all of these, graffiti and these political characters, but it's telling such a human story. And throughout all the stuff that we've read, I think it still holds true as one of my very favorites.
I was worried that when we would revisit it, I'll be like, this isn't as good as I remembered it. And that was partially true, but not very much. Like I was actually like, I was surprised by how much I'm like, this show still got it. Like it's still got a little, it's got some juice.
Yeah,
it does.
And I really think like my thesis is really the secret ingredient that sets it apart from the rest is joy. Like it has a sense of fun.
Oh, yes.
Characters joke. They make, and because I've also, why I'm doing this, I don't know, but I am revisiting early seasons Game of Thrones. And which, very closely I would construe with Rome and this like television arc, of prestige television and HBO and all that kind of stuff. But like that also is a show that, of all of the like dark fantasy shows, like that show had jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyrion was a favorite for reasons. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And every time Bron's on screen, he's like killing it.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Something that I think House of the Dragon is really missing. They like try, and I'm not buying it.
I haven't watched season 2 because like I enjoyed season 1, but it was also like there's a lot of traumatic birthing scenes you got to get through for one thing.
That's true. I actually think season 2 did a little bit of a better job, but I still it doesn't quite get there for me.
I think it's I think that's interesting to think about too in terms of like even looking at politics right now. I've been watching some of the DNC stuff, and Little John shows up for the roll call of Georgia, and it's a party, and you're like, it's kind of fun again. And like, oh my God,
Obama's
I miss this so much. And it feels like that's so much of what our TV shows have been for so long, of like just violent, dark. And it's like, I want a little more joy again in what I'm watching.
Totally.
And it's a lot of like kind of maybe, I wonder if it's like learning the wrong lessons, where if we cast our minds back to the far off year of 2008, where a little movie called The Dark Knight came out.
Yeah, which was so good.
Yeah, and then everybody was really like, I mean,
Yep.
the classic sort of, Hollywood learns the wrong lesson about a breakout hit and then
Yeah.
Mhm.
tries to reproduce the formula, but it's, the dark, gritty
Yep.
superhero movie like very much overstays its welcome
Yep.
and becomes
Yes.
the joyless Snyderverse.
Yeah,
Yes,
I went straight to
absolutely.
Snyder when you started talking about it too. I'm like, yep.
100%. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, that
And then you got to argue with people online who like think it's good. And anyways,
And that's why I think, like, this isn't necessarily my highest, like, what I would want to watch again, but, like, I was so pleasantly surprised by I, Claudius because there was just moments that you're like, "Olivia, that was a sick burn, woman."
it makes me so happy that you say that because like I am admittedly like biased toward and like defend that show maybe more than I should,
Yeah.
and more than it deserves. But like for what it's doing, like it has just great repartee. Like it's almost like it's like Sorkin S or something where they're just
yeah.
zingers,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
actors on stage.
I
Mhm.
recognize I, Claudius as like what it is and that it's almost like a cultural artifact in
Mhm.
itself. That I don't know. Watching it was not my favorite. It was
Interesting, okay.
so much like a stage play that I think that was kind of a slog for me to get through, that I was just like, I'm watching a play on a TV
That's
and
fair.
it's I don't know why.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite get past the set and the makeup
Yeah.
and then all
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that stuff, the visual things, but
And
I
the like the
But,
music.
like, if you could go and meme that show, if you could just meme that show, oh,
oh yeah,
It
chef's
should.
kiss.
It really
Absolutely.
like yeah. Meme artists out there need to like watch I, Claudius and go to because it is
yeah,
a gold mine for great
yeah,
Yes.
clips
yeah,
and
100%.
reactions. Mhm.
yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
the scene I think about constantly is Olivia addressing the gladiators, where her opening line is "You're all scum and you know it."
Yeah, I use that for the promo because I absolutely loved that speech. And that needed to be like they needed to bring it back for those about to die, just like have some randomly give the prep talk to
Uh,
Yeah, yeah. No, there was more joy in I, Claudius than there was
Mhm.
in Those About to Die, which, ugh, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah,
mhm.
and and, like, I think there is a shift. It didn't wasn't necessarily joy, but, like, the reason I still really liked Romulus too is I think you missed this part, Lige, when we were discussing because you had left, but, like,
Mm,
you know how much Navia pissed us off with her whole her vengeance and how
yes.
much she just screwed everything up? Versus
Yes.
Ilya is also driven by vengeance, but she remains empathetic and
Mhm.
accountable when she realizes that she made a mistake in her anger.
Yeah.
And, like,
Yeah.
that was just so refreshing to see a woman's anger not be,
Mhm.
like, all-consuming and destructive. Like, I think that's the
Right.
similar problem we had with Hera in season 1 of Blood of Zeus, right? Like, we
Sure,
want
sure.
Hera to get her vengeance against Zeus, but not in the way she did it, right? Like, because
Yeah.
she took out a lot of innocent people as a result. So, like, I liked that change. I liked that you could still have a vengeance story, but not have it feel soul crushing, basically, as a
Yeah.
result. So, like,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily always have to be funny, it just has to be more human.
Yeah, and that does feel more human,
Mhm.
right? Is that somebody, learns more information and changes their mind. Like that's
Yeah.
such a human thing to do.
Mhm.
I wonder what we're circling around is like a thing that I often crave from my media, and what frustrates me sometimes with a lot of things, not to name names, but with a lot of like YA and romantasy genres, is like competency,
Mhm.
Mhm.
where people learn a thing and then they stop being silly about it.
Yeah.
Where like you get a trope sometimes where it's like, I'm still just too angry, so I will keep doing this
Yep.
self-destructive or self-defeating or unhelpful action course of action, and I cannot control
Yeah.
myself. This is a really weird pull, but a thing that I found really refreshing was I was watching an anime called Moribitu Guardian of the Spirit, which is
Yeah.
I recommend, but it's good out there. But it's like the premise is that there's a bodyguard and she's contracted to protect this prince because there's like a misinterpreted prophecy that thinks that the prince is going to be the source of like the apocalypse. And so all of these royal assassins are out after the prince. And then pretty not terribly far into the show, it is revealed that like there has been a misunderstanding and a miscommunication. And then rather than perpetuating the misunderstanding, they actually just sit down and they're like, wait, so you say it's like this? And then they're like, oh, that changes things. Now we will readjust. And I remember just like out loud wondering, I'm like, it is incredibly refreshing to see a piece of media where characters like just effectively explain the confusion, and then the characters resolve the issue.
I think I've seen that anime
then,
too. It's like it sounds very familiar, and I very much enjoyed it.
It's also worth watching because the main protagonist is this woman who specializes in fighting with a spear, and she's like an absolute ass. Like she just kicks absolute ass.
Hell yeah.
And so there's actually like a lot of just really great like fight choreography and watching her just like go to town on people.
Yeah.
Love it. But yeah, I think the old maybe narrative or the old way of constructing like human psyche in a narrative was that emotions can overtake human logic.
Yeah.
And like, sure, like that.
You sound like Seneca right now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my God. Can I like go drown myself in a bathtub or something like that?
As you quote Stoic philosophy. No.
But that is possible, right? Like that our emotions can, derail us sometimes. But like humans also are great communicators, and humans also have love for others and care for a community and support of others. And that, rarely, even if somebody goes very far off the rails in an emotional bender, do they end up destroying the world or the apocalypse or something. And yeah, I think a much more compelling story is humans who communicate well and have a community. And it's almost like we should try to emulate those humans or something. I don't know.
To go off of like Colin's earlier point of common tropes, webtoon romance comics, which I enjoy. It's like so many things go wrong just because like the two love interests are not communicating, that it's gotten to the point that like fans celebrate communication between.
Use your words.
They're like so excited. Like,
yeah, see, that frustrates and bums me out.
Is dating that hard, you guys? I don't understand sometimes. Like, I haven't
Don't
had to
ask
do it in a
me.
long time.
I know. I was like, I don't know. You guys know where I'm at. I don't know.
Yeah, so Colin, I have a pretty good idea of who your joy of joys was to watch this last season. So I'm curious to know if I'm correct.
Are you thinking it's I Claudius? Because
no,
I was thinking
Thermae Romae Novae.
Oh my God, how could I have forgotten? Yes, it just rode in. I mean, truly, like in the sea of sort of dimly lit, washed out, dark room,
slow motion
scheming, this bright, colorful, high energy anime about a guy who just wants to build bathhouses and travels through time was like this. I feel it's like the meme of Hugh Jackman from, I guess, The Fountain, where he's like staring into the light and it's like the light is like hitting his face. Like I looked on the, I don't want to understate it, but I looked upon the face of God. And I saw that he was good. And then it, like truly, like I didn't know how in the can I was going to be to just watch this Japanese animator just travel to different onsen in Japan and like learn about the history of the onsen and then do a little sketch. And I was like, this is just so soothing. I mean, we talked about joy and like the absence of joy in popular media and life and politics as the world enters into a third century crisis or whatever it is we're in, whatever the analogy it is that we're in right now. And just like this joy of like, man, like just watching this like small, just lovely thing happening. I was like, this is what I needed. And I got to take a lot of baths.
Yeah, you did.
Which is also plus.
That's literally the only picture you've ever sent me for like any kind of promotional content.
And it's just me in the tub.
And your cat. And your cat.
And a cat.
Yes. And Leo often gets very concerned when I get in the bathtub, my cat, because, you know, I don't know. I wonder, it's the one shred of evidence I have that he actually cares about my well-being. Because like, he's like, why are you okay? Are you drowning?
What? No, I agree that it was absolutely a breath of fresh air and was just delightful. And I think you all know how much of a stick in the mud I am about any kind of animation.
Yeah.
Yes, you have a weird prejudice about anime.
I do, and I'm trying to overcome it. I swear to God, I'm
down
trying.
and you watched Avatar with us in Ganja Vecchio when season 3 was dropping Bookfire. You were there.
I love Avatar. I love it.
I don't want to
It's
be
great.
that dude, but I'm gonna be like, oh, like here's the list of like here's your homework of like
I know,
things
right?
to
I'm so
watch.
tempted sometimes. Oh,
I know. Well, I mean, God, send me what you guys think I should
Furin.
watch. I
For
mean,
for something new, Furin. Have you watched that one, Colin?
No, not
Okay,
yet.
well, you should if you like D&D. It's really fun.
Hmm. Oh, I mean, actually, speaking of like kind of it's actually, I mean, it's new and it's sort of joyful, but Delicious in Dungeon that I've
Yep,
been having a
that's
lot of
on
fun with,
Netflix.
where it's the premise, it's like a D&D adventure, but the conceit is the adventurers like they keep running out of food and that like caused like an almost total party wipe. So their realization is they're going to eat all the monsters on their way through the dungeon. So every
incredible.
episode is like them finding a new monster and like figuring out how to cook it. So it's like half Dungeons and Dragons show, half cooking anime, and it's like
Incredible.
turning the giant scorpion into like a shish into a a grill or something like that, or like
Okay, yeah.
how do you turn ghosts into ice cream, things like that.
Colin, I also have to ask, did you ever watch Food Wars?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I heard about sort of what that show was, what was happening, and I was like,
I
I
hate
don't
it.
know if this.
They're so good of making delicious looking food juxtaposed with like basically sex scenes that would rival Spartacus sometimes. Basically, it's like the premise is like the meals are so good that they have foodgasms. And like their clothes like disintegrate into a blinding light as they take a bite of the
Well, when you
food.
say it like that, it sounds kind of awesome, but in
Yeah.
practice, it's a little.
If you like
Yeah, I'm
food,
like,
if you
I
like
don't know
food,
about
if you
that.
like Japanese dishes, Food Wars is boy is it fun. Makes
I
me
mean,
hungry.
I was gonna say like my go-to recommendation for like we've really gone off
We really have.
the
We've
range,
really
but
gone off the
as we start
rails.
recommend like what's your starter anime for people who aren't into anime? But
Well,
mine's usually Full Metal
Full Metal,
Alchemist. That's the one
yeah.
that's
I've watched some of Full Metal, and so
yeah.
I
You
have
know.
enjoyed some of that. But I like there's so much that I sort of get intimidated on like which track do I follow
Mhm.
because
And then
there's like
Yeah.
Brotherhood and I'm like
I would say with that one,
ugh.
just watch. Honestly, the first one I watched was
yep.
Brotherhood, and there's a whole thing about like like the way when it deviated from the manga and all
Yeah.
that stuff. But like honestly, I think if you just watch Brotherhood, you will be good.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay.
And it's a not it's like 60 episodes. So
Yeah,
like
that's not unreasonable.
no, it's not One Piece, which is like going
Oh
on
god, yeah,
1,000.
no.
Oh
Um,
God, no. And I've watched
or
some of those with you, and I'm like,
Nah, I
what the
haven't even seen a One Piece episode
fuck?
because I know better. I know not to go down that.
I don't fuck with One Piece.
Yeah.
That and Naruto, I'm like, I mean, I know Naruto's like one of the most popular ever, but
I at least watched that
um,
when it was like back on Toonami. So
mhm.
it's like I at least know a lot of the characters that were involved for a certain extent.
Did you guys watch the Netflix show,
What?
the One Piece Netflix?
No.
No, I saw the first episode
Yeah.
and I did enjoy it. It was
I heard
right
it was
before I
really
went
good.
abroad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I don't
I
know.
watched it with my
I've
parent.
heard. Oh
It
God.
was. I literally was like
Parents.
right before I was going to Greece,
Yeah.
and I was like at my parents' house, and I was like, "What are we watching?" And it was like a real like we're in kind of gridlock because like and everybody is like, "I don't know what to watch." We're back and forth, and I like at some point I'm like, "This is a pirate. This is a show about a show based on an anime about pirates,"
Yeah.
and I just kind of pulled the trigger, and they actually like my parents really liked it, which I was like, I did not expect that reaction,
Well, you know
but
what the funniest
it's goofy.
yeah.
Like
The
Yeah.
funniest
Yeah.
thing is because Lash has a younger sister named who
I do.
you left. You left me in Iowa. And then
I
showed
know,
up.
I did.
And then we would go and hang out at a coffee house and we'd talk about anime. And like we
Yep.
were
who lived in Japan.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
my little sister.
I
would,
was
like,
there when she was learning
Yep.
Japanese. Like she was doing
Yes.
her homework and at Java House and we would talk about Haikyuu, which is the one about men's
Yes,
volleyball,
yes.
high school volleyball
I
team.
have heard a lot about that.
So good. And Demon
from
Slayer.
her.
Oh, Demon Slayer. Yes.
Demon Slayer
Oh,
also might.
she still will like post on Instagram. She's like, "It's Demon Slayer Sunday. Like, what are we all doing?" Like, she like.
I actually you say that because I need to get caught up with that.
I know.
one,
I
'cause
do. I
was
do too.
definitely
I'm
on like
like
a fun.
two arcs. I'm arc and a half behind at this point.
I like started with I was in Greece and I like got the like free 1 week trial and then like I got the first couple of episodes of the latest arc, but then it stopped and I like forgot about it. Like, oh, actually,
It's so good.
I'm probably
I
gonna
have
cut
really
a lot of
enjoyed
this out.
Demon Slayer. I have watched some of that with
The artwork
on Demon Slayer
beautiful.
Sundays.
It's
So
beautiful.
Demon Slayer, yeah, it is like just really great.
Yeah.
2 very boring minutes later.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Muzin has like a whole like
Y'all,
extra
we
dimension.
so off track.
We're off track there. I'm gonna like make a
Off
mental note,
track.
Colin. I gotta go back and like excise all this, or just put a little insert like. And then we talked about anime
So
for like
this
15
is why
minutes.
hopefully we're doing video, because this is great to like put on our YouTube channel, which we now have, but not in the podcast itself.
Not the full discussion. Nerd.
Like part.
Guys, we should just pivot and just become a Demon Slayer podcast.
I
We probably get a lot more listens. It's way more
I
popular
know,
than
we get-
Cody.
Get Ren on
our
here, yeah.
listenership is growing. I'm not even trying recently, and people are just following us. So like,
It's
Yeah.
like I think it like compounds, right? Or like it, like wealth begets wealth.
exactly, yeah,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah.
Okay,
What do we
this should be
hate?
the segue towards.
What do we hate?
Oh, okay. I mean, Spartacus.
I hate Those About to Die more than I hated Spartacus, which feels dramatic.
Which we should
I
say,
know.
hate is a strong word, but I definitely
Yeah, I
dislike.
Hate is a
I
strong
think
word, yes.
all of these shows have something to redeem them in some respect. There is something there for all of these that is worthwhile.
Okay, yes.
Like
I do agree.
nothing is like this should not see the light of day sort of things like 300. Like we were pretty much by the end of talking of 300, it's like Gen Alpha and Gen Z do not need to see this shit.
So,
fair enough.
Well, this is, I think, my big beef with Spartacus is kind of like, it's not that the show itself is overly objectionable. Like, there's nothing I can necessarily point to and be like, this is illegal or something.
Yeah.
The fans of this show, I think, bother me.
Oh yeah. The
Yeah.
reviews for that show are fun.
It focuses on the wrong things,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yes.
it hyper realizes or hyper accentuates the wrong things, which is fair enough, terrible, and not okay. But I was bored watching Those About to Die.
But to go off of that, I'm like yes and no, because like I keep saying Spartacus is just soul crushing to watch, but it also is like, but maybe that's because it was more authentic to the enslaved person's experience in Rome. And I found that frustrating about Those About to Die, about like how much it would tend to gloss over the
Very much
violence,
so.
the sexual
Yeah.
assault, the loss of agency, but still finding ways to undermine that loss of agency that Spartacus does.
Yeah, because I do agree that like Spartacus actually made rules for the world that they lived in, and they worked within those rules. Like you can't get out of this ludus. Like if you try, terrible things are going to happen, and like X, Y, and Z, and like how different people in the house versus in the ludus talk to each other. Like they abided by those rules. And I do think, yeah, in Those About to Die, like just the permeability of all of the spaces was very much inaccurate. Like, is somebody climbing the walls of your garden to sleep with one of your slaves randomly in your garden? Like, probably not. Like, that's not a thing.
There was also like the fact that like she was given the berries, and like the youngest girl, Kala's youngest daughter, who was bought by the woman to give to her husband.
Yeah.
And like, are the berries supposed to represent that like she lost her virginity, or she was on her period at the time? And if it's, I would assume they would have thought like she was menstruating, and it's like, and then she's fine. It's never a problem after that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
if that's what she was bought for, you think that wouldn't have happened eventually, and she just gets to hook up with the cute guy from Spain instead?
Yeah.
What?
No, it's like, no, it's not a realistic depiction of very real horrors of life that exist. And if we're trying to, go with that dark, gritty,
Mhm.
I don't know, I feel like all of the 10X stuff felt very dark and gritty and awful. Then like those realities don't make sense.
Yeah.
Even like, and I think there doesn't have to be anything on screen, right? Like there was so much, I think, discussion about like all of these horrific assaults that happened like in Game of Thrones that were on screen.
Mhm.
But I think of movies like Fury Road, Mad Max, which had this very real like situation of assault that has happened, but none of it is on screen. But it's a very like real world situation.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that there is room in between both of those things, like violence on screen, and just pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
It's I think it's something about our media and like why I give Spartacus is kudos that like we are very comfortable in showing extreme violence and injury, but we are still really uncomfortable about depicting and calling out rape when it happens. And Spartacus did. Like it did. And it's like
Yeah.
I don't know if I feel good seeing that. It's the same with Handmaid's Tales. Like I don't
Yeah.
it's soul crushing to watch, but at least they're willing to acknowledge a reality.
I mean, this is like a larger kind of debate and like that really fine line between like depiction for the sake of condemnation and then depiction and like at what point are we just reveling in misery or something like that, right? Like is it trauma porn to use the sort of crass form? Like at where does one become the other? Is this shining a light on this dark underbelly or this dark aspect of society and life? And cases X, Y, and Z, or are we just like torturing these poor women for the sake of torturing them on screen?
Yeah.
And it basically comes down to it's like I feel like Spartacus did it a little too much, and those about to die didn't do it enough. Is where it came down.
Yeah, because I do feel like there is a way to do it that walks that line, that does depict a reality but doesn't have to engage in that traumatic representation.
Yeah. So I guess, but I like the chariot racing and the betting, but it's like I would never say it's like never watch any of these. I think I would at the end of the day. I like that someone pointed out Spartacus is like a good trash TV watch. And like if you space it out, I was like, yeah, I feel like an episode. I need some Gannicus in my life.
The other thing about Spartacus that I feel like I can't even really, it's sort of self-insulated in that way because it doesn't have higher pretenses to being like it's kayfabe or it's schlocky. That's by design and that's fine. And like, it's ironic. It's hypocritical of me to like criticize the show for being like overly horny and gory when I spend all day playing Baldur's Gate 3, which is like a super horny video game. But
maybe this is the best way to phrase it. Which sequel or which next season are you least excited to see? Spartacus's House of Usher or season 2 of Those About to Die? And maybe that answers our question.
Oh God, do I have to watch? I would neither.
What house does Usher even have?
Right?
Lucy Lawless. They're bringing back Lucy Lawless. I
don't care. I don't like it.
I know. I don't like it either. It's like maybe if they brought Alithia back too.
Romulus season 2 is my answer.
Yes. Watch Romulus season 2. That is the correct answer. Maybe Dominus season 3 if it comes out. So. Hey listeners, we hope you enjoyed this little bonus episode reflecting back on season 4 of Movies We Dig. Check back later this week for the second part of the discussion where we play some fun games and look forward to season 5 focusing on archaeology in film. We have a fun season planned full of new guests, old friends, and some of your favorite media depicting archaeology and the ancient Mediterranean world. In the meantime, you can find all our episodes at movieswedig.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe if you like what you hear. And if you want to know more about our upcoming plans and episode releases, be sure to follow us on social media where you can find us under the handle of @DigMovies or some variation of @MoviesWeDig. Finally, before we officially close out this episode, we're going to throw it over to our friends Dr. Rad and Dr. G of the Partial Historians. This is an excerpt from their new book, Your Cheeky Guide to the Roman Empire, which is set to release in November 2024. Please support them by pre-ordering the book if you enjoy learning about ancient Rome, which we know you do. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Hello, and welcome to a special bonus episode of The Partial Historians. Or perhaps that should just be The Partial Historian, because it's just me, Dr. Rad, flying solo today. Why, you may ask? Well, it may have a little something to do with our new book. Dr. G and I have been busy writing a little book called Your Cheeky Guide to the Roman Empire, which at the time of recording is available for pre-order and will be due out late in 2024. I believe November is the auspicious month slated for release. And as it turns out, we actually have a little bit of bonus content that's going to accompany this book. That's right, we've got a whole section that's called With a Rebel Yell that will be available on the Ulysses Press website for those people who just can't get enough of ancient Rome. And we thought it would be a little bit of a treat for our listeners to hear us actually read out this bonus material for our book and give you a bit of an idea about what is in store for today. And I get to be the lucky one who kicks things off this time. I'm going to start with, well, to be honest, it's a place where you probably expect me to start, the chapter on Spartacus that we wrote. So this is With a Rebel Yell, the man, the myth, the legend, Spartacus. Let's kick this chapter off with a bold statement. Spartacus is the most famous rebel in Rome's history. Nowadays, part of his fame may be down to the 1960 movie starring Kirk Douglas, the man with a jaw of marble and a chin cleft as deep as the Grand Canyon. But where does his legend begin, and why did he become so notorious? Ancient Rome was a slave state. Whilst we will never know for certain how many enslaved people there were a lot of them, and they were everywhere. If you could afford it, you owned a slave. The richy riches of the Roman world might own hundreds. The state itself owned slaves. This meant that it was quite common for enslaved people from all over the known world to be living alongside free people. The Romans were aware that this could be risky. What if your slaves abused their insider access? What was stopping them from murdering their owners? This sounds like a horror movie in the making.
The call is coming from inside the house.
This is all to say that the Romans were always slightly on edge about the possibility of disobedient, or scarier still, rebellious slaves. They were allowed to dish it out, but slaves were never supposed to retaliate. If written histories can be believed, slaves have been part of the fabric of Roman society since the regal period. However, our records indicate that there were not that many large-scale slave rebellions, particularly after the fall of the Republic. The reasons why are complicated, and if we ever want to get to Spartacus, we will just have to accept this and move on. In the late Republic, there was a series of slave uprisings in short succession. The first two took place in Sicily, but the last originated on the mainland, and the rebels were very close to Rome itself at one point. This was the revolt led by Spartacus. Spartacus is not an easy man to get to know. This is not just because he liked to play hard to get or worked to cultivate a brooding masculine quality. He just was not important enough to have much recorded about him until he struck back in 73 BCE. Even after he did become significant, neither Spartacus nor his followers thought to keep a detailed journal of their adventures, or if they did, it disappeared somewhere along the way. A thoughtless oversight on their part. Footnote: all jokes aside, slavery in the Roman world was a bit different to the image of slavery that many may have from the United States of America. There were no blanket laws about enslaved people and literacy, probably because it was so impractical. People could be enslaved for so many reasons and at different stages of life. A common way to become enslaved at this point in Rome's history would have been to be taken prisoner in a war, so educated people were just as vulnerable as the next in this scenario. In fact, some enslaved persons were prized because of their high level of education and were used for administrative persons in households and even by the state. One of the most infamous examples of this is Claudius and the various freedmen or freed slaves he relied on during his rule as emperor. Back to the narrative. We have to rely entirely on pro-Roman accounts to piece together the activities of the escapees. Let's return to the origin of the whole shebang. We know that it all began in a ludus, or a gladiatorial school, in Capua. Capua was a prominent city with its own amphitheatre, not too distant from Rome. Spartacus was one of the gladiators, and therefore a slave. How did he wind up as a gladiator? There are indications that he was originally from Thrace, think Bulgaria, and he may have served in an auxiliary unit for the Roman army and deserted, perhaps making his living as a brigand until he was apprehended. He could also have been a prisoner of war. Thrace had a history of getting punchy with Rome. Most shockingly, a fragment from Varro claims that Spartacus was an innocent man who nonetheless was sentenced to this cruel fate. Whichever way you look at it, it was not his choice to be in this ludus. Believe it or not, some people did volunteer to become gladiators. Gladiators held an interesting position in Roman society. Their feats in the arena could win them admiration, but in terms of the social pyramid, they were right at the bottom alongside sex workers. It was kind of a love-hate relationship, like how we all feel about the Kardashians. The ludus was owned by a lanista named Lentulus Batiatus. This man may have been particularly strict or cruel, and this provoked a rebellion. But maybe being a gladiator was enough. Sure, you might win some renown for your skills in the arena and get decent medical treatment, but you were still a slave in a spectacularly dangerous job at the end of the day. You may not be forced to fight to the death in this era, but serious injuries and infections might still finish you off. The historian Appian records the most interesting and relatable motivation. Spartacus convinced the other gladiators to fight for their freedom rather than the entertainment of others. Was Spartacus a star of the arena who had managed to evade death in numerous death-defying duels? We don't know. Plutarch's description implies that Spartacus and his fellow escapees were fighters, not new recruits, but how experienced is anyone's guess. To be chosen as a gladiator, Spartacus was most likely still a young man. It would not have made good business sense to train a 50-year-old. Gladiators did not have easy access to the weapons they would have used in fights. Spartacus and co. had to break out of the ludus using whatever they could grab in the kitchen before they could secure more traditional weaponry. The rebels initially numbered anywhere between 30 and 200, but most sources agree that around 70 to 80 actually escaped. Yep, those sources again. Time to make an important distinction. These guys may have been rebels, but they were not a rabble. They knew that they needed to introduce some organization into this caper. 3 leaders were chosen, one of which was Spartacus, the others being gladiators named Oenomaus and Crixus. Here's where we can finally introduce one of the most intriguing details about Spartacus. He was married to a woman from his tribe, and his wife escaped with him. Only one source, Plutarch, includes this detail about Spartacus's wife, but a lot of adaptations of his story have latched on to the hint of romance and run with it. And it is romantic to imagine Spartacus and his wife managing to stay together when they were sold to Batiatus and her fighting for freedom by his side. Very unusual, though. The Romans did not prioritize keeping families together where slavery was concerned. Plutarch mentions her when relating a prophecy about Spartacus. Conveniently, she was a prophetess and a follower of Dionysus. So when a snake gave Spartacus's face a cuddle when he was napping, she knew it meant he was destined for great fortune and power. So this cuddle allegedly happened when the two were up for sale in Rome, so it must have seemed like wishful thinking at the time, although people in the ancient world did take omens very seriously. Unless this is all Plutarch's fantasy and a way to foreshadow that Spartacus was no ordinary dude. But why erase her from history? Women have had that happen too often, so let's run wild with this Maenad. Wife in tow, Spartacus and his followers managed to fend off some Capuan soldiers who were sent after him. That might not have been super hard for trained fighters. These guys may have been more like army reserves. It's what they did next that is pretty amazing. A force of 3,000 men, led by the praetor Claudius Glaber, was dispatched from Rome. The slaves took refuge on Mount Vesuvius, still over a century away from the monster explosion that would devastate this area, and it must have seemed to the Romans that they were well and truly trapped. There was only one viable way to descend from their refuge, so all the Romans had to do was wait. But hang on just a darn second, Romans. This is Spartacus we're dealing with. He may be just a slave to you, but the historian Sallust praised him for his strength and courage. Even Plutarch, a pro-Roman source, said that Spartacus was, quote, possessed not only of great courage and strength, but also in sagacity and culture superior to his fortune and more Hellenic than Thracian. There is no higher compliment from a Greek like Plutarch than to call someone kind of Greek. Being exceedingly clever, the slaves fashioned rope ladders out of the vines that grew on Vesuvius. They used these to lower themselves and their weapons down in a location that was not actually being surveilled by the Romans. This allowed the rebels to catch the Romans by surprise and capture their army. We know. Sounds like something out of a bad action movie, right? Yet this story is attested in multiple sources. We're leaning towards true for this one. The slave army continued to defeat the Roman forces sent against them. Actually, defeat does not quite capture it. They humiliated them. One praetor, Cosinius, was literally caught with his pants and everything down as he indulged in a spot of bathing. From the start, the rebels had attracted new followers in their travels. The official term would be randos, slaves, shepherds, even some free people, but only the poor ones, the disenfranchised. All of this success can only have made the prospect of running away to join Spartacus more attractive. If what Appian says about Spartacus dividing booty equally amongst his followers is true, this would only have increased the appeal. Spartacus also had a certain strategic flair, perhaps combining what he knew of both Thracian and Roman warfare. He didn't peak with the vine ladders. Spartacus gets credited with trying to fashion a proper army. His followers fashioned their own armor, shields, and weapons. They captured horses and formed cavalry units. During one of his earlier victories, Spartacus may even have captured some of the insignia from the defeated Roman magistrate, such as the fasces. The Romans would have just collectively rolled over in their graves if they didn't prefer cremation. The camp was guarded by sentries and organized regular patrols. The slaves once managed to sneak away from their camp after propping dead bodies up to look like their usual guards. Creepy. More disturbingly for contemporary audiences, Spartacus may have used captured Romans to stage his own gladiatorial displays to honor his fallen comrades. We may not love that last part, but we should not delude ourselves into seeing the two sides here as the goody versus the baddies. Most of Spartacus's followers would have led tough lives, if not violent ones. Their pillaging and plundering involved arson, theft, rape, and murder. Spartacus may have crucified a prisoner as a warning of what might befall them if they failed, killed people and animals that were slowing down his movement, and forced others to fight to the death. Let's just say few people in this story would have been chosen as a spokesman for fabric softener. What was the game plan here? This is where a slave diary or two would really help us out. The sources are conflicted about what the rebels were actually trying to achieve in the long term. Perhaps we should look no further than freedom! Get out! Get out of Italia or this nightmarish boot right now! That in itself is an understandable goal for a bunch of ex-slaves and disaffected poor. But after a series of wins and an influx of newbies, their plans may have started to change. With thousands or perhaps tens of thousands of followers, a unified goal was hard to achieve. Spartacus wanted to escape from Italy, but we're told that most of the rebels wanted to just ravage their way around the country. Or is that classic Roman bias at play? How long could their luck hold out if they remained? The Romans had not been too concerned at first by this small band of renegade gladiators. Now their numbers had grown, and it was not a good look for a collection of slaves and peasants to be defeating a premier power like Rome. Spartacus himself was either an exceptional commander or very intent on proving his wife right. Bless. The Romans threw the consuls and yet more soldiers at the rebels. Whilst the consul Gellius enjoyed some success against the Gallic Germanic contingent which had split from Spartacus's crew, Spartacus himself remained undefeated. It was time to call in the big guns, or rather, the deep pockets. Enter Marcus Licinius Crassus, very ambitious, very, very wealthy. Crassus agreed to take charge of a situation that had spiraled well out of control, even paying for 6 fresh legions himself. It is thanks to Crassus that we have one of our more detailed accounts of Spartacus. He shows up in Plutarch's biography of Crassus, perhaps as a way of showing Crassus up. Plutarch was not a fan. At first, Crassus did not have much more luck than those before him. He was so furious with the loss, he decimated part of his army. This literally means that you kill every 10th man. In case you're wondering, no, this was not a super common penalty. Crassus just had that classic dilemma. How best to show my displeasure with my troops? The decimation seems to have suitably scared the oatmeal out of the soldiers as Crassus's performance started to improve after this rocky start. Unfortunately, this means that our hero's star was starting to flicker. With Crassus's forces on his tail, Spartacus struck a deal with the Cilician pirates to transport his followers to Sicily, which had a recent history of slave revolts. Presumably, Spartacus intended to stir up the old troubles there. He never got the chance as the Cilicians betrayed him. Yar, matey! The slaves moved on to Rhegium, think the toe of the boot, where Crassus quickly followed. He ordered his men to build fortifications to try and trap the rebels in the shoe. We hate to give credit to the Romans here, but this was their vine rope ladder moment. This barricade was wide, tall, and long and involved a ditch, although probably nowhere near as long as Plutarch implies. It was definitely an obstacle and a gigantic pain in Spartacus's ass. Luckily, our slave commander still had a few tricks up his sleeve. On a stormy, snowy night, the slaves filled in part of the ditch with sticks, earth, and dead bodies. Yum. And managed to get across. There are hints of tensions within the slave camp throughout their rebellion, starting with the supposed disagreements about their goals. The fragmentary but early account from the historian Sallust mentions Spartacus begging his army to stop their violent assaults on the people in the area and them taking exactly zero notice. At this later point in the war, the division seemed to be manifesting itself physically, with the rebels camping separately. There may have been practical reasons behind this decision, food supply, water, but it may have been tied to the ethnicity of the slaves. Slaves and gladiators would have been from a variety of backgrounds, and the leaders, Oenomaus, Crixus, Canicus, and Castus, may have taken charge of the people who shared their own culture. Camping apart, however, exposed the slaves to more danger. Crixus had perished, along with many others, when they fought without Spartacus. After their escape from Rhegium, Crassus took advantage of another split to make an attack that probably would have been successful if Spartacus hadn't arrived just in the nick of time. Canicus and Castus's following were less fortunate when the Romans launched an assault on their detachments. Even with this loss, Spartacus's contingent was still capable of dealing the Romans a devastating blow. Plutarch paints this final victory as a turning point. Confidence infected the slaves like a disease. They weren't willing to play it safe and avoid battles. They weren't listening to their leaders anymore. They were calling the shots. But their next battle would be their last. There was an epic final clash in 71 BCE between the slave army and Crassus's forces. The rebels did not prevail, and many were slaughtered. Some of the survivors managed to flee into the surrounding areas, but 6,000 were taken prisoner and crucified along the road from Capua to Rome. a grisly end, and a strong warning. What of our valiant leader? Spartacus's end is as murky as his beginning. We will never know for sure what happened to him, but the sources indicate that he perished during the battle. Plutarch provides the most cinematic account of his last moments. Spartacus was trying to fight his way through the melee to reach Crassus, who was bravely putting his life on the line as well. 2 centurions tried to take him on, but Spartacus killed them, continuing his quest to find the Roman commander. Gradually, Spartacus's comrades were slain or fled. He stood alone, surrounded by his enemy. He fought them all to the bitter end, until finally one of them dealt the fatal blow. Spartacus's resistance was at an end. Rome obviously had more forces at their disposal in a conflict like this, making the slaves the underdogs. When you add in that tantalizing hint from Varro that Spartacus should never have even been condemned in the first place, goosebumps, literal goosebumps. And there's something many of us love about rooting for the underdogs, especially when all they seem to want is something that we now regard as fundamental: freedom. If we come back to the sizable slave population in Italy, the possibility of slaves everywhere uniting with Spartacus to fight, well, it sends our imaginations a little wild. But the fact remains that they didn't. Some slaves rallied behind Spartacus, but the majority did not. Romans continued to own slaves and train gladiators. The system remained. Little had changed. The only way the slaves could really have won was to evade recapture or death. We can still see the genuine concern aroused by this rebellion. The Romans sent increasingly higher-ranking people to deal with Spartacus, and when Crassus had taken over, either he or the Senate, probably the latter, sent for reinforcements in the form of Pompey the Great and Lucullus. Even the positive comments made about the slaves say something. For instance, their bravery in battle. The Romans go nuts for a soldier who only gets wounded in the front. Spartacus is not universally demonized. Indeed, he's even praised in some accounts. Did the pro-Roman accounts feel the need to build their enemy into a suitably impressive foe? We cannot be sure, and we certainly don't want to take away any of the very real accomplishments of these enslaved people. The Romans weren't the only culture to faint at the feet of manly warriors. Nonetheless, we do need to be wary, as the Greco-Romans were not averse to twisting the occasional detail to suit themselves, and the rebels would never have been their main priority in whatever story they were telling. Spartacus was gone, but not forgotten. How could the Romans forget a man like this? It challenged their understanding of the social order that someone with such a lowly pedigree could triumph against Roman forces. A slave commanding an army against them? Plundering villages, defeating praetors, consuls and proconsuls, evading capture for years, rampaging through Italy, even coming close to Rome itself? It shamed them deeply, and their war against him continued to be referred to for centuries to come. Does deep psychological trauma count as a victory? We'd like to think so. From one perspective, Spartacus' life was brutal and short. However, from another perspective, his journey was epic. To quote Florus, the man who, from being a Thracian mercenary, had become a soldier, and from a soldier, a deserter, then a highwayman, and finally, thanks to his strength, a gladiator. If you'd like to learn more about Spartacus, we suggest checking out Appian's account of the Civil Wars, Plutarch's Life of Crassus, and of course, the wonderful collection of primary documents put together by B.D. Shaw, Spartacus and the Slave Wars. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really hope that you enjoy that little chapter, that sneak preview of your cheeky guide to the Roman Empire. A reminder that that is just bonus content. So if you want to hear all the other wonderful stories that Dr. G and I have concocted for you, you will just have to make sure you pick up a copy of our book. Until next time, we are yours in ancient Rome.